I left that with a couple of the people I worked with there and did verification software. So that's where I did a lot of software development and had a consulting company that did that for other people. And then that company was acquired in this big chain. Finally ended up in a company that was half British and half French, which was not a functional combination of people.
Meet Dan, creator of the tCam-Mini, a portable wireless streaming thermal imaging solution that we currently are bundling with the Lepton FS and Go Pro mount. He joined me on why he made it, what it can be used for, and how you can get your own through the GroupGets campaign.
And that company ended up failing right after the events in 2001. And I was out of a job. And that led to, a few years of different things. And I decided that I was done with corporate life. And whatever I wanted to do on my own. And I also wanted to get back to building little widgets, things that were physical as opposed to just software. So I did a bunch of LED lighting stuff, which was not greatly successful, but led me to sort of getting in the crowd of people who do sculptural interactive art, lit art, and a series of clients that do these big installations, including one client who has been to Burning Man and has installations all over the world, who ends up, these installations are sort of permanent and she needs them to be functional, so she wanted an electrical engineer to design the guts and someone who know about writing code to write the code. So I ended up doing kind of the innards of these installations for her for many years, and that relationship has been ongoing for like 15 years now.
Wow. Okay.
And that just sort of led me to doing other projects and relationships with companies like SparkFun, for whom I designed a couple of products as a collaborator, which they manufactured and sold. And then over time, you're doing this stuff, and I have to make money. The little projects I did didn't generally make a lot of money, so I had to do consulting to feed myself, and that just led to a variety of different, all embedded electronics, so microprocessors and software and some gadget for like a whole range of different people. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the line, I got interested in thermal imaging. I guess I saw some article about someone who built something with the Lepton, and I bought actually a breakout board from GroupGets because that was the only place you could get it. Mm-hmm. And I started playing with that, and I went through a whole series of designs that all got documented on Hackaday.io, and that used TNC microprocessors, the Raspberry Pi, the BeagleBoard Black, and I finally settled on the ESP32. Mm-hmm. And I just sort of, and I guess it was just an interest. I think that thermal imaging is really kind of amazing to be able to see heat. It's just crazy. And to see temperature. And so I just ended up doing these things, and I sort of along the way always wanted to make my own thermal imaging camera. It would be free of all the limitations, like of a FLIR device, God bless them. and so I just sort of finally got there with the tCam and the tCam-Mini, and they're pretty complicated things. So it turned out that I was able to get tCam-Mini done, and I'm still waiting for the right way to get tCam delivered to anyone besides myself. And so that's sort of where I'm at. So I do this mixture of, I try to do stuff for myself and make that stuff available to people through crowdfunded campaigns or just releasing the designs, and then stuff for other people.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's exactly going along with doing stuff for other people. You were kind of like, you were doing consulting, from what I can understand. You're still doing consulting, and then you were like, let's do this little passion project of the tCam-Mini, starting to develop that. And you just explained that you were working with like big projects, like even within Burning Man and stuff like that. That whole maker movement really kind of like plays into like what projects you're working on too, if I'm correct. So Yeah. So then what other types, like, can you describe those projects? I mean, like, without, giving away too many details, or?
Sure. I mean, so there were like the series of interactive art projects, and then I slowly evolved. Like I have been part of the maker movement, and I belong to Boulder's maker space, Boulder, Colorado, and met a lot of great guys there. And like one project, this guy came in. It used to be an open house, and people could come in who weren't members. And this guy comes in and he brings in this hand-built little prototype of a hydration system for motocross racers. So, like, these racers are on a bike for 8 or 10 hours, and they have to hydrate. I mean, and actually, good hydration, I learned, can be like the difference between someone who wins and someone who doesn't, because you're just a little more on top of the game.
Yeah.
And they don't want like a camelback nipple laid on their lip the whole time because of the vibration. So he had this idea that the helmet would have a little nozzle, and you'd press a button and open your mouth, and you'd get a blast of water.
Okay.
And he was not a technical person at all, but he had gone online and researched enough with Arduinos and motors and batteries, and he hacked together this little thing that showed his idea. And I thought it was just amazing, and he was looking for someone to help him. And so I connected with him and ended up designing this system for him that he took to market, which was a little tiny, very tiny little button that fit on the handlebar of the bike, and then a backpack that had a big pouch of water and a pump. And you press the button and you could get these measured bursts of water in your mouth. And that was an example of one thing. Another, that I was publishing information about the thermal imaging cameras, and a scientist from a U.S. Forest Service laboratory contacted me. And he said, I would like you to design a custom camera because I am trying to get data on so that I can make mathematical models about how fires burn in a forest based on the type of tree and the wood and the configuration. And so we designed this camera, and he would put a bunch of them around a burn site, and he would torch this built up forest, and the cameras would record the whole fire, and all that data went it was used by mathematical models he constructed so that he could analyze the burns. And that led me, that was sort of an impetus behind tCam-Mini being released, because I saw that in addition to people wanting pretty pictures from thermal imaging, like you look at your house and say, oh, look, I don't have insulation there, it's leaking tons of heat, I need to fix that.
Yeah.
Maybe people wanted the actual radiometric data to do some sort of scientific process or something. So the tCam-Mini products or designs were designed first and foremost to deliver the data, but then of course you have to be able to visualize it so they all can show pictures. But the core of that really is like the radiometric data file. So anyway, that came from that. And it was interesting that one of the people who funded the project with the motocross hydration system was also working with another inventor, a woman who had left a job as an analyst because she could not bear to analyze another spreadsheet. And she wanted to build something, and she was in her 20s. She went to China, didn't speak Chinese, created a company, got a Chinese factory to design and manufacture an oil infusion product for her that she had as her passion. Brought that back to the States and created this really successful company because in fact, who wants to infuse things? Well, the people who use marijuana want to infuse things. And so it became this massive, successful product. And she has a whole series of food-related technology products she'd like to develop. And so this investor hooked me up with her, and I became sort of like a resource for her and a designer. So we're doing with her several products. One of them is a food storage mechanism that uses gases to pumps a vacuum into Tupperware and uses gases to make the food maybe last 5 times longer than it would have. And an app, of course, and all this IoT stuff. So that's sort of a range of stuff. And And now I'm drawing a blank on all the other things I've done, but a ton of things.
Yeah, no, for sure. You have a prolific career. Thank you so much for going into more detail about that. I just now I'm trying to set it up where it's just the thermal camera. So to your point, yeah. So that information really, the radiometric information was really interesting to you. And like you mentioned, there's a few use cases for it, such as not only home security, but, insulation, checking what could be going on with that, or making pretty pictures, like you just mentioned, as the base of it. Along with the tCam-Mini, I'll state this out. It's located on the Hackster page, but the tCam-Mini is a small wireless streaming thermal imaging camera designed to make it easy to get and use radiometric data from a FLIR Lipton 3.5 sensor. And like you said, you just explained that just finding all different kinds of use cases for it. Is there any other use cases that maybe we haven't delved down yet, besides making pretty pictures or using security, or even within home installation? You also mentioned that perfect fire use case.
Well, right. So he was using it for data collection. A reason a person like me, an engineer, might want a thermal imaging camera is we design a circuit board, which is the other thing I've done a bunch of, is solar charging systems. And so maybe we're designing something that deals with power. It's got a power supply, it's transforming, or it generates heat. Well, you want to analyze how your circuit board is heating up, because maybe there's an issue with it getting too hot, or a part is getting too hot. And thermal imaging cameras let you visualize, let you watch your device in operation. And so, for example, with my desktop app, it can plot up to 5 points of temperature. So the idea is that you might have a circuit board you're going to run for a few hours. You aim the thermal imaging camera at it, and you start the app recording maybe every second or every few seconds, and it plots the temperature, and you pick with the markers, I want to look at this part, I want to look at this section of the board, I want to look at this, I want to look at this, and it'll plot the temperature of those parts over time. So that's maybe another use. Mm-hmm. I've gotten a lot of emails from people who put tCam-Minis on drones, because they want to be able to, to look at things from the air. And you can do things like look for living creatures, in a thicket of something. You can do things like fly over a house and look at how the roof is doing as far as it being insulated, or where there might be leaks. So those are other applications. Of course, people use that for looking at their homes. People, I think that it's going to be more and more important. People can use, for example, thermal imaging cameras to look at industrial systems and look for problems. I would like to enhance my web application so that it could connect to a bunch of cameras that are monitoring things, and you could set if this region of this picture, and maybe it's looking at some machine or a boiler or something, gets past this temperature, I want a text message or an email to be sent by the system. Mm-hmm. So I think things like monitoring. I think it'd be really cool if anyone from Boston Robotics ever sees this video, to stick a thermal imaging camera on the Spot robot.
Okay.
You could walk the camera through anything and look at stuff, get thermal data back from it.
Got it.
So yeah. So I think thermal imaging. I think there's thermal imaging applications which are beyond me in the the biological sciences, looking at how things generate heat. It is clearly a gigantic field, and as FLIR and a bunch of other companies' success attests, there's a lot of applications. And I just think maybe through GroupGets and with the tCam stuff, we can bring that to a new class of people, and we can, it's less expensive maybe than a lot of the commercial solutions. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That makes sense to me. No, that makes sense. I feel there's just, if you go to our GroupGets website and you're hey, I want the FLIR camera, you'll notice that it's a big price tag of you know what, never mind, maybe I'll just take a step sideways. But so I think you've been able to make this more, accessible, especially just like you mentioned within these applications. So that makes sense to me. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, and I think when paired with the Lepton FS that you guys now have, that maybe that doesn't fit everyone's needs, but it brings down the price yet again.
Yes,
So.
Exactly. And with the GoPro mini case, that would be perfect. Especially, like heck, if you're outdoors, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
So speaking of the tCam-Mini, and now just bringing into more of like the more technical aspect of it, the tCam-Mini has undergone a revision number 4 since your initial launch back in Hackster in February 2021. So what are those updates?
So the updates were really for 2 reasons. One, we learned how to make it better and make it cheaper. So there was some redesign for that. And then really the big change for tCam revision 4, and there was revision 3 that I designed, and then it had an issue I didn't like, so revision 4 came about, is to make possible the tCam. So I always had in mind that there would be a camera model called the tCam. And this is a real camera. It has a screen. You plug in a little micro SD card, which you can save stuff to, just like a real camera. You get a live view. But it does all the other things. It can stream to the apps or to the desktop app. And the desktop app has additional functions, like with tCam, to be able to like wirelessly offload pictures from the camera. So you don't have to pull the card out. You can just get it. And I had been casting about ways to make that camera. And I decided in the end that I wanted to have a display board, a new board, which I call GCore. And to make it easy for people to make this camera, I wanted to have a layout so that I decided I would just have all the code related to thermal imaging on tCam-Mini, and then it would have an interface, a new interface, a hardware interface, which other devices could connect to, and I would use that and would connect it to GCore so that I could make this big tCam. So the biggest change on revision 4 is this new hardware port connection for it, and support in the firmware to support that. And then that allows, and this is a prototype of the big tCam. And I'll turn it on, hopefully. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah.
So it brings up, and then in a minute, as soon as it boots the little camera, the tCam-Mini. So there I am.
Wow. Okay.
And it has an interface, and the interface, if I could, has normal like camera setup stuff. It's all touch screen. If I can find that button.
There we go.
And then how it's built, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the rear of it, and this is just a laser cut acrylic case. And you can see the tCam-Mini sitting here with the green light on it. And the board behind it is GCore. And then they just plug together. So the idea with the change in tCam-Mini was to be able to make this camera and to be able to make it really easy to assemble. So, and there's 2 parts. And then the GCore is actually a general purpose ESP32 development board, which can have a million other uses, just like in any other development board. And I'll have a ton of demos and example code for it.
Perfect.
So that was the big impetus behind making the changes for the tCam-Mini 4.
Got it. Okay, yeah. So then that does lead me to then the GCore is next. I did see that you do have some documentation on it, but more coming soon. Am I right?
Right. So
yeah.
GCore, I've put up some documentation describing it, a bunch of demos, the libraries to support it, and working with you guys at GroupGets to try to bring it to fruition. It is currently a victim of the great parts shortage. Which is affecting everything. The design is complete, is finished, it works. It's just a matter of being able to get enough parts to manufacture boards. But I think that's going to be possible. And I'm very excited by that because it is a development board I've always personally wanted. It is to make gadgets that are battery powered, that have a graphical user interface, and that have features like soft power, like a real device. You can turn it on and it can turn itself off. It manages the battery really well. It's very high performance. So every decision I made in that device was for performance related. So the GUI, you can make GUIs that are incredibly reactive and smooth and fast, more than probably most little user level dev boards. So, so anyway, yeah. So that's a work in progress.
Got it. No, we'll look forward to see more updates on that. And of course, again, I anticipate that we'll be working together very soon on that.
Yeah.
We actually have a question from a backer. Edward sent in, first of all, he wants to say that he wants to thank you for developing such an entry-level solution for thermal imagery. His question is in regards to the power supply. So, quote, I noted that the power supply is between 1.2, 3.3 volts, but I couldn't find any information or advice on GroupGets or on Dan's website suitable for power sources and connections. Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, you betcha. Actually, so what the item on the campaign page is describing are the voltages generated on the board, which range from 1.2 volts to 3.3 volts to run the different parts of the board. In fact, the board itself can be powered anywhere from between 3.6 and 5 volts. And people have successfully powered the board using like a small LiPo battery connected to the 5-volt input on the back of the board. And, or even a USB charger battery pack that just, you plug the camera into the charger battery pack and it'll power it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that makes sense. And if there is any more questions in the future, we will be talking soon about how you can get a hold of Dan. And then I will have the contact information below within our video description. The second question that was asked by Edward was that the project is at 50% funded. Any idea when the devices might be available? So I think that's a GroupGets question. Basically, we do have the products in-house here at our headquarters. It's basically just when it is funded. So the campaign has been live for a little under a month now or so, if I'm not mistaken. So since we're halfway there, I anticipate a pretty quick pickup following from this video and from all the other updates and promotions that we're running. So just make sure to follow us. We will definitely send updates to our backers as time goes on, as well as to new backers and on our social media as well. And again, I will include more information in our description below. GroupGets sells your custom PCB on the site, but what would be like the next best development board be? Because you originally said it was developed with an ESP32.
Right. So you can, since the camera is open source, people can actually build their own if they don't want to buy a pre-made PCB. And you need a development board that has an ESP32W Rover module. And there are a lot of them out there. And you also, that module should have the revision 3 ESP32 silicon. And I can't think of at the moment of the specific name of one, but there are a lot of boards out there, especially like on Amazon or AliExpress. But a W Rover module and an ESP32, and then you would use the GroupGets left-on breakout board. So that's what so you just have to wire that to the ESP32, and then you can load the tCam-Mini firmware into that, and you can have your own camera.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that. Yeah, the PCB is available on GroupGets, and we do have that bundle together, so it makes more sense to go through the bundle at this point. But yes, just like you explained, that is if you want to go a little bit more hackstery on it. Is it possible to connect an older version of the left-on camera, such as a 2.0? I know those are, obviously being replaced by the 3.5 and up, but is it possible to go any further back?
So currently it's not possible. I did add support for the left-on 3.0 in the last firmware release, but the 2.0 is basically a quarter of the resolution, and I sort of optimized the code to support the higher resolution 3.5 and 3.0. It would be technically possible for someone to take my firmware and rewrite the left-on VOSPI pipeline so that it was only getting the lower resolution of data, and then sort of manipulate the data to feed the rest of the existing firmware pipeline. But that wasn't something I was currently thinking of. It would be possible. It's just a matter of how many people really want that versus, now with the cheaper Lepton FS, can be satisfied with a higher resolution picture.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. No, just wanted to clarify that for anybody. And one of my last questions here is, with the software, is there any way to export the file as a video? So for instance, I'm able to capture it on the iOS app or on my desktop. Can I export that as a video?
So currently not yet, but
Okay.
those are both features I would like to add to both mobile app and to the desktop app.
Got it.
Export it like as a movie file or MP4 on the desktop, and probably an MP4 on the mobile app as well.
Got it. Okay.
But it's a lot of code, and so it's just a matter of finding the time to do it.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you. No, perfect. Then we'll definitely keeping up with your page. And speaking of, what is kind of like the best way to get a hold of you? Because I know going through Hackster, we always have some updates on the GroupGets site as well. Do you have a Twitter? Is there anywhere that people can like come to you or ask questions?
So probably the easiest way to get to me, because I'm pretty old school about all that stuff, is to email me at danjuliodesigns.com. And you can go to my website, and there's a link at the bottom. If you click that, it also generates an email to me. So I am most responsive on email. I do try to monitor some of the sites, and I've asked like Hackster.io and Hackaday.io to notify me when people comment on any of my projects that I've documented on their sites. But for some reason, I don't always get those notifications. And it may be weeks before I remember to check one of those. So I feel bad for the people. And I definitely try to be really responsive. So when people reach out to me, I always reply, even if I can't give them the answer they want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Because I really appreciate that community.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, speaking of the community now, at this time of this recording, it looks like you are 50% of the way through for the tCam-Mini bundle on GroupGets. So we need 5 more to make the group get possible. But I imagine that'll be possible. I think it's been up for like less than a month, so I don't imagine that'll be very difficult. Is there anything else you want to announce or call out?
I guess I just want to let everyone know that continuing to work on this project and the kind of one of the probably I can't guarantee when this will be released, but I have found a person to help me create an Android app, so that we're working towards having a mobile app for Android, which I think is a really big deal. A lot of people have Android phones. And also looking at a version of tCam-Mini that connects to Ethernet and can do power over Ethernet. So you can have a wired version of the camera as well as a wireless. So that has been prototyped, and now trying to figure out the best way to bring that to market.
That sounds fair.
So those are a couple of big things, I think, and there'll be a new firmware release and a bunch of stuff coming up.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for joining us. And again, we're halfway through the tCam-Mini bundle. There's probably going to be a couple more GroupGets after this one to be on, to give you guys a heads up. With the antenna with the antenna feature available now, that it might open up some more opportunities for GroupGets. So just make sure to follow Dan or us to get an idea of what else can be coming through for the tCam-Mini.
Yep, definitely. And that antenna version is great for a drone. Because you can hang an antenna below the drone and you can get a lot better signal quality. So that was a great addition, I think, that you guys did.
Sounds rad. Well, thank you so much, Dan, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I will chat with you guys later.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.